In July 2019, Menhaz Zaman brutally murdered his entire family to hide a secret. He'd been lying about his university life for years. After the killings, he confessed in a gaming chat, shocking his friends. How did this horrifying tragedy unfold? Stick with us as we dive into the case that left a community in shock. If you're into true crime, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into cases like this one. Menhaz Zaman was born and raised in Markham, Ontario, a suburban city just outside Toronto. He came from a close-knit family of Bangladeshi immigrants who valued education, hard work, and strong family ties. His parents, Menhaz Zaman and Momtaz Begum, worked hard to provide a stable and comfortable life for their children. Menhaz, his father, was an engineer, and his mother, Momtaz, was a homemaker. Menhaz had one younger sister, Malaysia, who was a high-achieving student, set to start university. Also living in the home was his grandmother, Firoza Begum, who was elderly and dependent on the family for care. By all outward appearances, the Zaman family was typical of many immigrant families, striving for success in their new country. They took pride in their children's achievements, especially in education, which was seen as the key to a better life. Menhaz, like many first-generation immigrants, carried the weight of his family's expectations. His parents believed he was on track to graduate from York University, where he was supposedly studying engineering. They had been eagerly awaiting his graduation, planning for a celebration, proud of their son's accomplishments. However, Menhaz's life was not what it seemed. In reality, he had dropped out of York University after his first semester. Unbeknownst to his family, he had struggled academically and felt overwhelmed by the pressure to succeed. Instead of confessing his difficulties to his family, Menhaz made the decision to lie. For nearly 4 years, he maintained the facade of attending classes, studying, and progressing towards his degree. He would leave home each day, pretending to go to school, when in fact he would spend his time elsewhere, often at local malls or gaming online. Over time, this lie grew heavier. Menhaz's guilt and fear of being exposed mounted as the expected date of his graduation approached. His family had no reason to doubt him. They trusted him completely and often spoke proudly of his supposed academic success. In fact, Menhaz went so far as to fabricate details about his studies and even future plans, reinforcing the lie with more deception. His mental state began to deteriorate under the weight of this ongoing deception. Menhaz became increasingly isolated, spending more and more time online, withdrawing from family and friends. His online interactions, primarily through gaming platforms, became an escape from the growing anxiety and fear of being found out. As graduation day neared, Menhaz's panic deepened. He feared the shame and disappointment his family would feel if they discovered the truth, that their son had not only failed to complete his education but had lied to them for years. This fear became overwhelming. Menhaz did not confide in anyone about his predicament, nor did he seek help for his mounting mental distress. Instead, his thoughts turned to a catastrophic solution. In his mind, the only way to avoid the inevitable confrontation with his family was to eliminate them entirely. This decision, rooted in fear, shame, and an inability to face the consequences of his actions, would soon lead to one of the most tragic family murders in Canadian history. On July 28, 2019, Menhaz Zaman carried out a calculated and horrific plan that would end the lives of 4 of his family members. That Sunday morning began like any other in their quiet Markham home. There were no outward signs of the violent events that were about to unfold. Menhaz had made a decision that morning. He intended to kill his entire family to prevent them from discovering the years of lies he had built around his academic failures. He knew the time was running out. His supposed university graduation was approaching, and he feared the truth coming to light. So he set in motion a series of murders that he would later calmly recount to his friends in an online chat. The killings began in the late morning or early afternoon. His first victim was his grandmother, Firoza Begum, who was 70 years old. She was the most vulnerable member of the household, often staying in her room due to her advanced age. Menhaz used a crowbar to strike her repeatedly, ensuring she could not cry out for help. After she was incapacitated, he then used a knife to finish the job, making sure she was dead. This methodical approach of using both blunt force and a sharp weapon would be repeated with his other family members. After killing his grandmother, Menhaz stayed in the house, calmly waiting for his next target to come home. His mother, Momotaz Begum, returned in the afternoon from a walk she had taken. Menhaz greeted her as she entered the house. At some point during her arrival, he attacked her, just as he had done with his grandmother. Again, he used the crowbar to incapacitate her before finishing her off with the knife. His mother, unaware of the fate of her own mother in the same house, likely didn't suspect a thing until it was too late. Hours passed, and Menhaz remained in the house with the bodies of his mother and grandmother. The next to come home was his father, Menhaz Zaman. Menhaz, who had been at work, arrived in the early evening, expecting to return to his usual routine. However, Menhaz had no intention of sparing him. Like his mother and grandmother before him, Menhaz was attacked with the same brutal method, struck with the crowbar and then stabbed. Menhaz, a hard-working engineer, had no idea that his son had been lying to him for years or that those lies would lead to such a devastating end. The final victim was Menhaz's younger sister, Menhaz Zaman. Menhaz was a promising young woman just beginning her journey into adulthood. She had returned home in the evening after spending time with friends. By this time, the house was a quiet tomb, with her parents and grandmother already dead. Unaware of the horror inside, Menhaz entered the home and was met with the same brutal fate as the others. Menhaz attacked her with the crowbar, and once she was incapacitated, he used the knife to kill her. After killing his entire family, Menhaz remained in the house for hours. He did not attempt to flee or cover up the crime. Instead, he stayed in the same space where his mother, father, grandmother, and sister now lay dead, their bodies arranged in separate rooms throughout the house. During this time, Menhaz remained calm and composed. He even took to an online chat room where he detailed his actions to his friends in real time. He shared graphic descriptions of how he killed his family and even sent photos of the bodies as proof of his actions. It is important to note that Menhaz did not seem rushed or panicked. He had carried out his plan with cold precision, waiting for each family member to arrive home so he could kill them in succession. He had made sure that none of them would be able to fight back or alert anyone for help. The murders occurred over several hours, starting with his grandmother in the morning and ending with his sister in the evening. Yet Menhaz showed no signs of remorse or hesitation. As night fell, Menhaz continued to engage with his online friends, discussing the murders in a detached and chilling manner. His friends, initially unsure whether he was serious, soon realized the gravity of what he had done and alerted authorities. To many of the online friends, this initially seemed unbelievable. At first, they assumed Menhaz was either joking or playing out some dark fantasy. Given the virtual nature of their relationships, there was a certain detachment from reality that sometimes comes with online interactions. For years, Menhaz had presented himself as a normal, albeit somewhat quiet individual in their gaming group. His personality online had never suggested that he was capable of such an extreme act of violence, and most of the members in the chat struggled to believe that someone they had gamed with for so long was capable of murder. But as Menhaz continued to provide more details, their disbelief turned to shock and horror. His descriptions were too specific, too real to be dismissed as a joke. To further convince his friends of the gravity of his actions, Menhaz shared photos of the crime scene. He sent images of his dead family members, their bodies lying where he had left them in the house. These graphic photos left no room for doubt. What Menhaz was describing wasn't fiction, it was a brutal reality. The photos clearly showed the aftermath of the murders, and the sheer horror of the images sent shockwaves through the chat group. At this point, Menhaz's friends could no longer deny what was happening. They were no longer interacting with a regular gamer, but with a man who had just confessed to killing his family in cold blood. The online community, which had primarily known Menhaz through his virtual persona, suddenly found itself in the middle of a real-life murder confession. Some of the friends urged him to stop, while others were at a loss for how to react to the escalating horror. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, several members of the gaming chat took immediate action. They began contacting authorities both in their own countries and in Canada to alert them about the confession. Despite the physical distance between them and Menhaz, his online friends felt a moral obligation to report what they had witnessed. The anonymity of the internet had initially made it easy to dismiss his claims, but now, faced with undeniable proof in the form of graphic images and detailed descriptions, they acted quickly. One of the friends, who lived in the United States, even provided the Markham police with Menhaz's personal details, including his address, which helped law enforcement locate him and respond swiftly. When officers reached the Zaman residence, they were met with an eerie calm. There were no immediate signs of a struggle or disturbance from the outside, and the house appeared as any suburban home might on a quiet summer evening. However, as they made their way inside, the horror of what had occurred became clear. The bodies of Menhaz's grandmother, mother, father, and sister were discovered in different rooms throughout the house, each victim lying where they had been killed earlier in the day. The gruesome scene confirmed the reports given by Menhaz's online friends. Inside the home, Menhaz himself was found, sitting calmly and showing no signs of panic or resistance. He did not attempt to flee or fight back. When officers approached him, he complied without any issues, and they took him into custody without incident. Menhaz's demeanor during his arrest was notably passive. He did not resist or try to evade capture. It was as though he had been waiting for the police to arrive. His calm behavior in the aftermath of the murders was consistent with the detached tone he had used when confessing to his online friends earlier that day. As news of the crime broke, the local community was left in shock. Markham, a peaceful and family-oriented city, had never experienced a tragedy of this magnitude. The Zaman family was well known within their neighborhood. Neighbors described them as quiet and polite, with no indication that anything was amiss inside the home. To learn that Menhaz had brutally murdered his entire family was incomprehensible to those who had interacted with them regularly. For many, the idea that a young man could carry out such an act against his own loved ones was deeply unsettling. The media quickly picked up on the case, and it became a major story both in Canada and internationally. The details were shocking. A seemingly normal 23-year-old, burdened by years of academic deception, had wiped out his family in cold blood. The added element of Menhaz confessing to the murders online, sharing graphic details and photos in a gaming chat room, further intensified the public's reaction. This case brought attention not only to the crime itself, but also to the growing influence of online communities, where such confessions could unfold in real time. Neighbors and friends of the Zaman family expressed disbelief and sorrow. Many could not reconcile the image of Menhaz they had known with the actions he had taken. Some of his classmates from high school, who had lost touch with him over the years, were equally shocked by the news. They remembered him as a quiet and somewhat reserved individual, but never suspected he was capable of violence, let alone the murder of his entire family. Menhaz Zaman's court proceedings began shortly after his arrest, and the case moved swiftly through the legal system due to the overwhelming evidence against him. In the months following the murders, Menhaz remained in custody, awaiting trial. The prosecution had clear and undeniable proof of his guilt, including his detailed online confessions, the graphic photographs he had shared with his gaming friends, and the evidence gathered from the crime scene. There was little room for any kind of defense, and it soon became apparent that a guilty plea was the most likely outcome. In September 2020, just over a year after the murders, Menhaz Zaman appeared before the court and formally pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder. This plea confirmed his responsibility for the deaths of his grandmother, Firoza Begum, his mother, Momtaz Begum, his father, Menhaz Zaman, and his sister, Massacred Zaman. Each count of first-degree murder carried a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole for 25 years. Given that there were 4 counts, the court had to consider whether these sentences would run concurrently or consecutively. During his court appearances, Menhaz showed little emotion. He offered no explanations beyond what was already known and remained composed as the court reviewed the case. His official confession, given as part of the court proceedings, reflected the same detached demeanor he had displayed during his initial arrest. In his confession, Menhaz admitted that he had lied to his family for nearly 4 years about attending university. He explained that he had dropped out after just 1 semester but continued to pretend that he was pursuing a degree in engineering at York University. Menhaz detailed how the pressure of maintaining this lie became overwhelming. As his supposed graduation date approached, he felt trapped, fearing the shame and disappointment his family would feel when they discovered the truth. In court, Menhaz admitted that it was this fear of facing his family and confessing to years of deception that ultimately drove him to murder. His confession was straightforward, and he did not attempt to justify his actions or seek sympathy. He simply acknowledged that he could not bear the thought of his family's reaction to his lies, so he chose to kill them instead. The impact of Menhaz's actions extended far beyond the immediate tragedy of his family's deaths. In court, the surviving extended family members were given the opportunity to deliver victim impact statements. These statements revealed the profound grief, anger, and confusion felt by those who had loved the victims. One of the most moving statements came from relatives in Bangladesh, where Menhaz's extended family had been devastated by the news. They described the Zaman family as kind, generous, and deeply devoted to each other, and they expressed their heartbreak at losing 4 beloved family members in such a brutal and senseless manner. Neighbors and friends from the local Markham community also struggled to come to terms with the crime. In their victim impact statements, many expressed disbelief that such a tragedy could have occurred in their quiet neighborhood. The community had known the Zaman family as hardworking, peaceful, and involved in local events, and the loss of Menhaz, Momtaz, Firoza, and Malaysia left a lasting wound. For many in the community, the idea that a son and brother could commit such an act was unfathomable, and they struggled to reconcile Menhaz's outward calm with the brutality of his actions. The court also heard from Menhaz's former classmates and friends, who described him as a quiet, unassuming person who had never shown any signs of violence or aggression. Many of them had been shocked when they learned about the murders, unable to connect the person they knew with the horrific crime. The betrayal felt by Menhaz's friends, some of whom had known him for years, was evident in their statements. They spoke of how his lies had not only deceived his family, but had also affected everyone around him, leaving them with a deep sense of mistrust and disbelief. In September 2020, Menhaz Zaman was sentenced to life in prison for the brutal murders of his grandmother, mother, father, and sister. Under Canadian law, first-degree murder carries an automatic life sentence with no possibility of parole for 25 years. However, given the severity of the crime and the number of victims, the court imposed an extended period of parole ineligibility. Menhaz was sentenced to 4 life terms with a total of 40 years of parole ineligibility. This means that Menhaz will not be eligible for parole until 2059, when he will be in his 60s. Given the gravity of his crimes and the devastation he caused, even if he becomes eligible for parole, it is unclear if he would ever be released. The sentencing brought a legal conclusion to the case, but its effects on the community, both locally and online, have been long-lasting. In Markham, where the Zaman family had lived for years, the murders left a deep scar. Neighbors who knew the family were shocked not only by the violence of the crime, but by the fact that it was carried out by someone they had seen grow up. The trust and sense of security in the neighborhood were shattered, and many residents expressed that they would never look at their community the same way again. Even for those who didn't know the family personally, the tragedy highlighted the hidden pressures and mental health struggles that can exist behind closed doors, serving as a reminder that no community is immune to such violence. Beyond the local impact, Menhaz's case resonated widely within the online gaming community. The platform where Menhaz confessed to the murders became a focal point for discussion about the role of the internet in both enabling and exposing crime. For years, Menhaz had led a seemingly normal life online, engaging with friends and fellow gamers in a community where no one suspected the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. The fact that he chose to confess in such a public yet anonymous forum highlighted the complex relationship people can have with their digital identities. The online gaming community that Menhaz had been part of was left grappling with the horror of having been witness to his confessions and the subsequent media coverage of their involvement in reporting the crime. Thanks for watching. If you found this case interesting and want more deep dives into true crime stories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to turn on notifications so you never miss an update. We've got plenty more cases coming your way.